So my talk's going to be about Microsoft Universal Event Tracking Consent Mode and what you need to know before May the 5th. Yeah, Phil already introduced me. My name's Richard. I'm a technical communication specialist at User-Centrics, which basically means I have to explain complicated stuff in writing or in presentations, as I'm doing right now. I've been with User-Centrics for close to 6 years, doing consent management stuff. I'm 44 years old. I'm Dutch, hence the accent, and I have a lovely beard. Let me start off with a little bit of context before I start talking about Microsoft Consent Mode. So the reason this is all happening is because of the Digital Markets Act, which essentially, prior to this being released, almost all the responsibility for data privacy was on marketeers or the people using these larger services. And what the Digital Markets Act basically does is it transfers some of that responsibility onto 6 major players, being Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, or Google, as you probably know them, ByteDance, known for TikTok, Microsoft, obviously, and Meta. So now these players have to ensure that no data processing is taking place without the end user's consent. So they needed a mechanism to sort of like process, okay, am I allowed to run the services to their full extent? So this is what Universal Event Tracking Consent Mode does. And this applies mainly to the people in the EU, or rather the European Economic Area, including the UK and Switzerland. Now, the DMA is not new. It's been around for about 2 years now. They've been, the first proposal was in 2020. And fast forward to next week, you will have to have Microsoft Consent Mode enabled. Otherwise, you will lose some advanced capabilities such as conversion tracking, which basically tells you, okay, how are people doing what I want them to do after I use some form of campaign. So does my advertising actually result in people buying my product or watching my content or doing what I generally want them to do? Same thing with retargeting. If people were close to but not quite doing the thing you want them to do, for example, they had already put stuff in the shopping basket, but for some odd reason they decide, you know what, I'm a little strapped for cash this month, let's just wait. Then we can sort of like get another shot at that. No consent mode basically means that everything is totally to the base level of what you're allowed to do without any personal information. So this is kind of a big deal. So on to actually what consent mode is. Now, I like to tell stories because that makes a little bit more sense than just explain technical difficult things. So imagine you have a robot, and this robot is in the park and it's handing out cookies. Now, regardless of whether you take the cookie or not, it records that. So if it offers you a cookie and you accept it, then that's recorded. But if you don't, then it also records that. However, if you do accept the cookie, it also keeps a little bit extra eye on you, like, okay, are you making faces as you're eating it? Are you eating it very fast, or did you take a little nibble and throw the rest out? So it goes much deeper into figuring out, okay, so what about this cookie? Did you like it? Were you looking for another one? And this is sort of what the advanced version of consent mode does. If you reject the data processing service, it being Microsoft Universal Event Tracking, it will still capture some data, and it will make some modeling using AI, but it won't use any personalized data. It won't you lose some of these advanced tracking options. But if you say yes, then game on, and Microsoft Universal Event Tracking does everything so how does a consent management platform fit into this? Well, if the robot software that helps it decide how to react to whether or not you want a cookie, then the consent management platform is whether you wanted that cookie. So it's a mechanism to basically figure out what services are you okay with, and what kind of tracking capabilities am I allowed to use. So to put that in a little bit of a a little graphic chart, the computer to the left, that's you. The second little icon, that's a website. And as you visit the website, the first thing that pops up is a banner, for example, ours. And this banner essentially informs you of everything that's going on in the website, like which services there are, what tracking capabilities there are, and you can either look through them one at a time, or you can just say flat out yes or no. Or what the CMP or the consent management platform does is it can then switch on and off these services. And if you implement it like that, completely black and white, so we call that basic mode. So if someone, for example, says no to the Microsoft Universal Event Tracking, it will just flat out either work or it won't. So yes means the service runs and it runs at full capability, or it doesn't at all. But what it also does, and this is where consent mode comes in, it also sends a signal to UET, basically saying you're allowed to offer your services, or you don't have consent. And this is where it gets interesting, because that allows the service to run regardless of what the user says, but either with full capabilities or with limited capabilities. And we call that advanced consent mode. Implementing this is kind of easy, at least I think so. You just need to make sure that that little script to the left that precedes the actual Microsoft script. And I can go through it real quick. It looks more complicated than it really is. So like the first line is basically, okay, this is a script, a JavaScript. The second line, basically, if UET already is loaded, then it will just use that object. So see this as sort of like the box where I can put my consent data. And if it doesn't have the box yet, then it just creates a new box, hence those little square brackets. Now, as soon as we have the box, then we're going to put a note in there that says consent, default, and in this case that there's only one parameter, add storage and denied. That last line, wait for update, this is in milliseconds, and the reason it's there is if for some reason we already know whether or not the service is allowed to load, we don't have to apply this default setting. So we're essentially giving UET a half a second to announce whether or not already knows what the consent level is, and otherwise we apply these default settings. Then once the defaults are set and the banner presumably pops up, then and somebody presses the button, then that second command to the right is going to be issued. So there it says, again, it says consent, but now it says update, and now it changed add storage to granted. So this is assuming that somebody said yes, thank you to all services. If they said no, then it will still be denied, and basically nothing changes. Now you can do this manually, or you can have the CMP do it for you, which I would recommend. And there's another little funny thing. If you don't implement this script to the left, but UET is still loaded and you are in the European Union, it will assume that you do not have permission. You need to remember, because of the DMA, Microsoft has some skin in the game, so they won't risk running the service at full capacity without knowing for sure whether or not the user is okay with this. So you could say that the script to the left is optional, but we do prefer that you actually use it just to make sure that there's no funny business going on. So the default settings are there. We know absolutely sure that the settings are set to denied up front, because when in doubt, it's better to say okay, no. And then either way, when consent has been given, or a return visitor visits the site, then this second command will be pushed anyway. There's another little cool thing. If you implement Microsoft's yeah, I just keep saying UET every time, but if you implement UET through Google Tag Manager, you can actually choose to inherit consent mode settings. Now, they're very similar, and the syntax is also almost the same. So essentially, if you open up the consent settings sections of the tag, this has to be the actual tag, so it can't be a custom thing. Then you can say enable consent updates from GTM. So that says, okay, these updates that normally come from the consent management platform and are sent to Google Tag Manager, those are being redirected, or not redirected, they're also directed towards UTM. So you don't have to manually do it again. Although if you use one of our CMPs, it will do it regardless. So this is not required for user-centrics or Cookiebot users. Inherit the initial consent. That is if you already had that consent mode script that you probably know from Google Tag Manager, then you don't have to use the script that I showed you on the previous slide. This is a little bit of ease of use thing, so you don't have to do things twice. There are more and more of these consent APIs popping up. These are the ones I know about. So from UET, Microsoft Clarity. uh, Google Tag Manager, that's the one probably most of you know. Facebook Pixel, and you can see that the syntax is very similar. It's always the object where you deposit your consent data, which you use to communicate to the platform, and then it always starts with consent, and then either true or false in the case of Microsoft Clarity, or revoke and grant in the case of Facebook Pixel. And with Google Tag Manager, it's just a lot more granular, but it's denied and granted. What I hope this means is that there will be at some point a sort of like a unified consent signal, sort of like with the transparency and consent framework. This is mostly for publishers, so I'm not sure that everyone is familiar with it, but this is basically a unified standard that allows you to encode consent settings for different services and providers, and encode this in a string, which then can be read by these providers, and then they know, okay, I'm allowed to use these capabilities, or I'm not allowed to do anything at all. So what I'm hoping is that Google has taken the first steps here. They were very early on ready with consent mode, even before DMA was a requirement. And you can also see it's much more granular. It goes into user data, personalization, yeah, the works. It allows a lot more fine tuning. These aren't even all the settings there are. So I'm really hoping that these yeah, that this is going to be sort of like a global standard. So what you should absolutely do now is if you do use Microsoft UET or Bing or Clarity or Google Consent Mode or Metapixel, then absolutely use one of these consent mode options, because it consider, well, assuming that you have a consent management system that actually is configured correctly, then it will become that black and white situation if you don't use consent mode. So either if you're lucky and people say yes, thank you to all services, then you get all the data you want. But if they do opt out, you get nothing, and that is a bit of a shame. If you use consent mode, on the other hand, then you will get some data no matter what. You'll obviously get much better and more usable data if they opt in, but you can still use a lot of the data that is collected from opt-outs for modeling, and the more the better. So you obviously also need a mechanism to collect and pass consent, and that is obviously a consent management platform such as User-Centrics or Cookiebot. The link here goes to MeasureMinds, which is a partner, so hosting this event. So if you sign up via them, then you have that connection to them, and they can help you get started. Another thing, everyone always loves to procrastinate. Don't do that. Like get it preferably today. Like do this immediately. In the case of our CMPs, shameless plug here, we have free trials. So you can get started for free. Immediately get started. Start working on this today, because it's next week. It's on, well, actually it's in 6 days. So if you are using any of these services, and now we're focused on UET. But if you are using any of these services, you really want to make sure that you have this implemented and ready before the 5th next week, because yeah, otherwise you'll be missing out on a lot. If anything is misconfigured, or if you just simply don't use consent mode at all, it's just going to assume that it doesn't have consent, and you will suddenly see your data taking a huge dip. So this is really super important. Hence the red text. It's serious. That's all I got for you. If there are any questions, then please put them in the chat or the FAQ, and then we can go through them.
Well, Richard, we've got a question here. I'll just read this out. Is consent mode required to be sent when uploading offline conversions through Microsoft API? There's no field where I can put this information, and the Microsoft press release doesn't explicitly mention anything about APIs, only web pixels, i.e. UET and segment, etc.
Not exactly sure I understand the question, because consent mode itself is sort of an API. So this is a way to translate consent data to a format that UET understands. What I do know is, like, for any form of processing of personalized data, you would have to send this consent data. So even though I don't really fully understand the question, you would have to have a consent signal that gets appended to whatever you're sending. Otherwise, it will just assume that you're not allowed to. I don't know if we can get some clarification on on what this means.
Maybe let me kind of guess what they mean. I think with Google consent mode with
Hmm.
offline conversions, Google introduced a rule where you had to send the like, ad storage and I don't know, two other categories, etc., on the upload of a GCL ID into Google Ads. In effect, they wanted that parameter. Like, so let's say it's a lead gen website where
Hmm.
they want to kind of upload offline conversions. They're basically saying pass that consent signal along the chain into like Salesforce, HubSpot, and then connect the dots later. Um, I'm not sure. I haven't read that Microsoft has put that as a requirement. At least, and obviously, I know Microsoft doesn't really get used as much as Google. So I've not seen an option for doing that. But yeah, I can investigate later and see. I know I've so we do use sort of Stape, and they've got a both a connector for Google Ads and Microsoft, and their offline connector is quite advanced. So it
Yeah.
may be there's something within that. I mean, I suppose ultimately you could send it as a custom field and just hope, like, use the same format as what Google Ads is using and hope it gets kind of read in the same way.
They are incredibly similar. It does seem though that Google has quite a lot more options. So I'm to be perfectly frank, I don't know how to do it, but I assume you would need that data because otherwise it would they wouldn't want to risk processing data that they're not allowed to. So it will probably just get removed. Um,
Hmm. Actually, the attendees replied saying, yes, that's what they're referring to, but they've suggested that the field is being dropped when it's uploaded, which suggests that Microsoft haven't whitelisted that field on their offline conversions, which sounds a bit nuts given that there's like 5 6 days away. Um,
Yeah, but
mm,
also considering if you like speaking honestly here, if
mm,
you look at that they basically shamelessly copied consent mode because like the syntax
mm,
is beyond similar. It's even they even use the same parameter names
mm,
and the only thing they're looking at is ad storage. They didn't bother to to take the ad personalization parameter or
mm,
the ad user data or any of the cool extra features that consent mode offers. Also, like for example, URL encoding or URL pass-through rather. So
mm,
this is one of those features that people kind of hate, but I like. If you disallow the use of cookies, it will actually just append this data that normally would be in the cookie. It would append that to the URL and pass it to the next page that way. I personally like that, but people hate that the URL suddenly looks all messy. Yeah, that's sort of like going on a side
mm. Yeah,
tangent
no,
here, but
I mean, that's an underutilized feature, and it's often a problem, more of a problem actually in the US, where you've got sometimes a floating footer, let's say in California, and it's running in well, let's say it's running in opt out mode, not opt in mode, and someone's able to traverse to the second page. Then in that instance, the pass through is actually it's kind of helpful because it may be on the second page you get consent. So yeah, it's true that Bing doesn't or Microsoft doesn't support that, but I suppose yeah, hmm, uh, they're kind of going for a simplistic kind of option. I think I did see that add user data is now native in the Bing consent template within GTM. I think that's been added. Uh, uh, so yeah, in addition to the ad storage like native kind of field, I mean we've found that we've had to because originally we were recommending changing the Bing template to in effect kind of basic mode, as in adding the categories,
yeah.
and then obviously it then introduced kind of modeling. So we actually had to go through a bunch of accounts and actually remove that field because as I said, the goalposts have changed. So before it was correct to block it or put it under Edge storage, it would be nice if Google had a magic button to kind of correct that, or a button that just turned on the second tick box because we find a lot of clients don't even realize where that is, let alone kind of that they need to turn it on in within 6 days time.
Yeah, I also think that They haven't done a really great job at communicating this clearly. There's still a lot of well, we see this in our support department that
Mm.
usually right after one of these cutoff dates, then suddenly it just flows in with people asking questions about this, and and then we usually also ask like, but haven't you received any communications? So either they don't read the emails that they get, or they're somehow lost, or the instructions are ambiguous or not really clear. So we also expect that around the 6th, we're probably going to be busy. Well, not me personally, but my team. Yeah, what I really like about consent mode, and what I also think is very important to point out, is that a lot of people use the basic mode, which is basically kind of ruins the idea behind consent mode, because the idea is that you get some data no matter what. So if you would take the strict the basic implementation, where you essentially change the trigger from whatever it normally is, let's say all pages, to in our case cookie underscore consent update, then essentially you will lose a lot of data, because if they say no, then it's just nothing. Then you're not getting anything, which is, of course, I mean, that's the safe way to go about it. Kind of want your data.
Yeah, it's the example of the two examples I give are one in the UK a long time ago. They had the ICO, which changed from an opt out mode to opt in, and there was a famous chart that just went like massive
Yeah,
step change. And it's a good example of where you need modeling because the modeling would stop that sudden step change.
yeah,
The other one is when Facebook got hit with opt-in on apps. They shifted models, and their tracking kind of dropped through the floor, sort of thing. I think Apple have reversed their ruling on that recently, but it still creates a kind of like what happened to all the data that over that time. So yeah, you kind of almost you need to know the size of the sample in order to scale up from the opt-in sample that you got. So it makes sense to me why Microsoft needs that. And the same, I'm surprised that Facebook hasn't introduced something equivalent. I know if they got their kind of mixed media modeling alternative, but yeah, it is strange that there's like they seem a bit late to the game sort of thing. One other question, Richard. We got another question actually that's just come in. Sally's just asked if we're using the latest OneTrust script with GTM, do we just need to tick the second box? Seems too easy. Can I'm just going to mention just one thing about that one, which I thought, because I know that Cookiebot and User-Centrics are quite active in their community container, and there's lots of updates to it. One thing that I was quite actually surprised about with OneTrust, which is not because there's a common mistake that we see with consent mode, which is kind of auto block or smart blocking gets turned on by accident. And what that does is it stops the G tag running and thus stops those consent mode pings. So OneTrust, for some weird reason, like deployed an update to their community template to add a tick box for auto block, which I'm still trying to understand why they did it. Because it's like A, it's a asynchronous environment, not synchronous, and B, Google even recommend not turning auto block on within GTM. So I'm sort of scratching my head about that one, but I always tell people don't change the default don't activate auto block within GTM for a start with. And I was surprised that a competitor kind of rolled out a change that's going to basically break the setup.
yeah. I obviously don't know much about OneTrust, but
Hmm.
I'm assuming that the checkbox Sally was talking about is the one I have on the screen right now. And again, assuming that they support consent mode, Google consent mode, that is, then yeah, basically just checking these two boxes will ensure that the consent mode data that is sent to Google is translated to a format that UET understands, and then theoretically that it would work. In regards to the auto blocking, well, for the reasons you just explained, we just don't allow it. So if you implement either of our CMPs through Google Tag Manager, then you cannot use auto blocking. There's a whole bunch of things that will probably go wrong because of how auto blocking works. So to really make it simple to understand, imagine that you take every script in the website and you just queue them up, and they get checked one at a time. So imagine you're at a bar, and there's a bouncer in front of the door, and he has a guest list. Now people go to this bouncer and he is like, okay, is your name on the list? If yes, then keep going. But Google Tag Manager basically just sends people at whatever or scripts in whatever order they arrive, including the bouncer. So you could risk that 5 people, troublemakers, have already entered the bar by the time the bouncer is there with his list. So that's one thing. But let's say you have friends, and these friends, they come together. So if they go to the bar at the same time, we're all good. You can go in. But now they sort of like come separately, and let's say they really depend on each other, and one of them gets to go in and the other one doesn't. Uh, then you have problems. So generally speaking, when you have an asynchronous loading solution like Google Tag Manager or any other tag manager for that regard, it's just a really bad idea to use something like auto blocking simply due to the way it works. You will risk reference errors. You will risk scripts just going past that we're not supposed to. It's really a bad idea. Don't do it ever, regardless of your CMP.
Yes, and it's a reason why it's much better to use consent mode categories rather than automatic blocking, and also it's really bad for site speed as well.
Yes.
And in fact, actually, Autobot would stop both Google consent mode and Bing consent mode because both are going to get disabled.
Yes, exactly, and then you're left with nothing. So yeah, if you are going to use something like consent mode, you really want to be careful with something like an auto blocking solution. And again, like with Google Tag Manager particularly, it's so, yeah, okay, I say easy because I do it every day, but it's relatively easy to ensure that these solutions only run under certain conditions, and then if they even are allowed to run, they're usually either in restricted mode or full mode. So you would kind of not need the auto blocking. That's usually if you have a lot of inline scripts that you don't really know how to manually deal with. So usually I also say like, okay, if this auto blocking thing is not really working out for you, your page speed is affected negatively, or it blocks something it's not supposed to, consider moving everything to Google Tag Manager because it's so easy to use, even if you're not a developer or someone who's not very comfortable with.
Just one question for the attendees, and I probably should do this as a survey, but I just put in chat instead. Can you put a yes or no if you have fixed Microsoft consent mode? So just put yes if you fixed it, and no or a dash if you're about to fix it or haven't fixed it yet. Or if you're not sure, just put, I don't know, question mark. Because I think what we're finding is a bit like with the kind of scary emails that Google have been kind of sending out with the GTM sort of GTAG setup change that really confused people. They're like, oh, I've got this scary email from Microsoft, what do I do? And for instance, I linked to the help page on Microsoft's site, and it really doesn't. It just says things are going to change. It doesn't really say like, here's a button to press.
Yeah.
I think also for me, what's kind of ironic is that the integration between Microsoft Bing and GTM, it adds the Microsoft tag in custom HTML mode. It doesn't add it in like the template that you're seeing on the screen, which is like totally nuts. So it's almost like Big have made the problem more of an issue because by adding it as custom HTML, there's not a tick box to make it easy to fix.
I mean, this would be my preferred solution. If you are in a situation where you already use Google Tag Manager, and presumably you'll already have Google Consent Mode because they've been warning about that for, I think, well over a year, then this would be the way to do it. So simply when you add a new tag, you use that search field at the top of at the right of your screen, and just search for Microsoft Advertising. I think this is the one that pops up, maybe two, but this is the one you want, the one with the blue icon. And expand the consent settings, experimental, and just tick both boxes, and then you're already set. Then you don't have to worry about this. Then it will just take care of itself. So this would be my preferred solution. If you are comfortable with adding code to headers, then this would be the left script would be what you add above either Google Tag Manager if you decide to load through there, or above the actual inline script. I can also see in the chat that there's a mostly question marks.
Yeah.
I think I hope that people understand that these are the two models. So either you implement a little script, or if you're like, I don't like all these crazy letters, then take the Google Tag Manager route. It's super easy and just, yeah, 2 tick marks and you don't have to worry about it. It seems almost too easy to be true, but it really works.
Yeah, although I would just add that tag needs to be loaded on a kind of OneTrust updated, ideally, or at the point where the consent cookie is read, so that it doesn't read a default of deny and or whatnot. I'm not talking about just so it kind of doesn't send a deny pixel when it should send a like accept pixel sort of thing. The other question, Richard, I asked, I was trying to sort of understand, is we find a lot of kind of advertisers have accidentally turned on Microsoft Clarity, which is obviously not shown on the screen. So when they add the Microsoft UET code that is on the screen, and they turn on conversions in Microsoft Ads, and suddenly they end up finding they've got a session recording tool kind of active on the site without even knowing about it. And that's problematic partly because, especially in the US, there have been some quite nasty kind of class actions with like Hotjar and session recording tools and such. So what's your recommendation regarding the Microsoft Clarity, which can sometimes be bundled with that Bing UET tag?
Yeah, in that regard, I would use the code that I have here on screen right now. Microsoft Clarity has its own form of consent mode, sort of. So it's just a different object. So it doesn't take it from UET. Unfortunately, it would be nice if they both just looked into that box, but apparently it doesn't. So here I would set that separately. I wish I could just show you an example of that. You can, like with our solutions, what I've written in a support article is basically you just create an event listener that sets that checks the consent for the marketing category, and then basically determines whether it's to send of true or false in that Microsoft.clarity command. Uh, Initially, you wouldn't really have to worry about that, assuming that Microsoft did their due diligence and handles it the same way it does with Bing. So if it doesn't know what consent you have, it defaults to false for European users. It will probably default to true for American users, but that should not be a problem with their legislation. So in this regard, you know what? Should I? I can just quickly in the chat just write how I would do that. Live coding session.
Yeah, I don't think I'm just trying. I'm not sure it's going to let me do scripts actually in chat. I'm just trying to paste in at the moment, and it's not letting me do it.
No, it's probably going to see that as an attempt of funny business. But what I would do then, so this is because I know Cookiebot by heart, having worked there for a long time. So that would look sort of like. So basically, what I did here is I created an event listener that checks for Cookiebot consent, and then if and then basically as soon as Cookiebot announces, "Hey, I know what the user wants," then it is essentially constructing that window.clarity command with consent, and then uh, whether or not the marketing category was accepted. So that would be the way to do that. I know that gets pretty technical, but as you can see, it's relatively simple. I just shook that out of my sleeve in what 2 minutes. And again, I assume that it would be false by default. Otherwise, you could, of course, sort of like you do with Google Tag Manager, where you basically say window.clarity equals window.clarity, or and then square dashes, and then immediately issue that command that says window clarity consent false. So that way you would sort of like set that data ready for it as soon as it loads, and then that would also work. I hope I haven't confused people by
No,
going at that little
that makes
tangent
sense.
there.
I'm trying to put in chat, but it won't let me at the moment. But I was just going to show this to people. Here's a similar sort of thing. So this is kind of what we use. So we read the Google consent mode object, and
Oh yeah,
then if we're either well, normally we try and use the tick box because it's kind of a little bit easier to manage and it's
yes,
native. So normally we wouldn't add this one, but this is before that tick box existed. And then on Clarity, we read that same old object, so consent
yeah.
object dot analytic storage, and so for instance down here,
Yeah, so you're essentially looking up what
mm,
consent mode has sent to to
yeah,
Google Tag Manager, and then
yeah,
picking that data and then applying it to yeah, that's great. I mean that
yeah,
would work.
yeah. The other question that we encountered, which is a bit of a weird one, is we originally put down clarity as an analytics tag because it's kind of like similar to Hotjar. But then we got kind of feedback, or A, because of these kind of US class actions, and B, because it's kind of owned by Microsoft.
Mm.
So we are like, actually, it's probably safer if we put it as ad storage, or in fact, even both, just to kind of double cover. And so that's on this check here. We were potentially listening for, uh, um, yeah, always like looking for ad storage kind of in there, but also requiring analytic storage for clarity. But yeah, that's a yeah. As I say, it'd be nice if in that tick box list of the native tag they had a tick box saying integrate with clarity. And we've seen some third-party community templates try and do that, but they're not
Yeah.
official kind of Microsoft templates. And I've also seen some workarounds using kind of community like just a Google Consent Mode or Bing Consent Mode separate community templates, but again, just seems a bit kind of over engineered. So yeah, I wish Bing would just update their native template with a second tick box for like opt in or out of clarity and just read that because it does seem double cover because like this is already exposed. Why are they asking for
Yeah.
another declaration?
That's a good point. And essentially, what you're doing here is probably also what the UET tag does. It also basically asks Google Tag Manager for the consent data for the ad storage, and it just applies that to itself. And that's essentially what you're doing here for clarity as well. It would, of course, be also nice to, if yeah, like you said, that you just added another checkbox saying like, hey, do you want to also forward this to clarity? Then
Yeah.
that would actually be which goes again to my like I said with this slide, I'm hoping this is turning into a sort of like a universal standard where basically they always check whether it be Google Consent Mode or whatever some universal consent mode setting exists, and then apply that. I mean, that would just make everyone's life so much easier, because then basically any CMP could just populate that object, and then any service would be able to pick that out and see like, hey, of course this is a little bit of a problem with if you do it on the service provider level, because as I'm thinking about it, if you let's say you have both universal event tracking and you have clarity. Now, if you're a Cookiebot user, they both fall into the marketing category. So basically, as long as you accept marketing, both are allowed to load. But because they base their consent whether or not there's consent for the ad storage, so cookies for ad purposes. But if you use user centrics and you have both clarity and UET, and for one reason you deny one and not the other, then you have a problem, because now you're comparing apples and oranges. These are service providers and not storage types. So then it's like, okay, what do you do?
Yeah, yeah. I suppose that well, the it depends if yeah. I mean, with what I've seen with if you take the example of UTM tags, like Google kind of introduced them, and they just became the standard.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping, and the same kind of with the data layer, it's sort of become the common like name for stuff. So I'm hoping that the Google consent mode kind of objects become the standard. Although I do wonder why. I still scratching my head about why ad user data and ad personalization exist because it's like, well, they just get bundled with ad storage. It seems a bit pointless.
Yeah, to be quite honest, I also never really understood why they because it's not something you can choose separately. Even if you configure a tag to use consent, you only get the storage options. You don't get the option of saying, okay, so maybe they have something they're working on something, so they later on give that granularity. I'm actually not sure. I've wondered about it myself.
Yeah, the only two instances I've seen where it's been used is A on the Google Help page, where they give an example of like a ad personalization tick box and an ad user data tick box, and then on an email sign up list where someone enters their email address, and then on a thank you page, it's saying, would you like to opt in to kind of email personalization? Uh,
Yeah,
which
for
is
for those purposes, it makes sense. Yes.
and the on just on the debugging side, so someone's put an example of an object to push into console. We tried using the Bing's kind of Chrome extension to validate because that does show you the consent signals. Ironically, it's blocked though on Chrome. Like Microsoft haven't updated their own extension, So you've got to either like manually whitelist it every time, or you've got to install it on Edge where it does work,
Yeah.
which is like, what?
I've actually switched to Edge for this very reason, also because Chrome
Hmm.
won't allow you to copy and paste code into the console, which is I get it, but it's
Hmm.
so annoying.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes I think if you type the word allow paste, sometimes there's maybe ways around it. But the other issue we've seen is with um, Microsoft Clarity debugger as well is very limited. We thought, oh, that would be great. We can use that to debug Clarity, but
Yeah.
actually, it's just a plugin that connects to Clarity and does a heat map overlay. So it's like, don't. And yeah, and obviously someone's put the values are either D for denied or G for granted. Again, it's like
Yeah.
why didn't they just copy Google's standards of granted or denied, not come up with a different naming convention for
Yeah,
what?
exactly. That's also the thing with yeah, in Clarity it's true and false, which I kind of like because that's what you would do in programming. But if you are going to copy their standard, which let's just face it, this is what they do, then it's kind of silly to go with revoke and grant and you
Mm,
just obviously Google has set the standard here, like they did with UTM, as you pointed out.
mm,
So why not just go with that? It seems to work very well. Consent mode has been around for a while now, and it generally appears to work very well, and there to my knowledge, have not been any lawsuits that challenge this method. Yeah, and maybe that's also why Microsoft was so late because yeah, like I said, it's next week, which is of course soon, but it's late compared to when when DMA went live. That's almost 2 years ago now.
mm.
So maybe they've just been waiting to see, okay, is Google going to be dragged to court for their consent mode, and maybe they were like, okay, now we feel good about this. Now we can take this route.
Maybe they were like, oh, Apple's just got fined 500 million and Facebook 200 million. Oh, probably about time we do something now.
Yeah.
Uh, the it is I thought as part of DMA that so LinkedIn did get covered by Digital Market Act, and I thought Bing didn't for some because it was like seen as a smaller network. Has that changed now? Are they both now covered by DMA?
Ooh, I'm not sure. I do know that they are looking into adding additional gatekeepers. So you have these
Hmm.
six major players, and
Yeah.
and as you rightly point out, that it's not that Microsoft as the entity Microsoft is it applies to them. It applies to certain services they provide. Um, Specifically the ones that have to do with data processing. So I'm actually not sure with Bing. I would say that would be definitely a contender for yeah
Yeah.
for having these rules applied to them because there is processing of personal
Yeah.
data there.
Yeah, LinkedIn definitely was. I
Yeah,
think maybe it's got updated because I know on the first round it wasn't, but as they've expanded out because I think there's now like Booking.com and a few other sites are now caught by DMA. So I need to check if it is or isn't kind of covered. It sounds like given that sorry, Microsoft are changing the game, it probably sounds like it is because they're wanting to kind of clean up their act a bit because obviously
yeah,
they're enforced against, not the brands. So it's kind of like they're risking a 10% global revenue, not necessarily but they may want to relay that final risk through to the users of their tool. Hence why they're kind of forcing everyone to, change to a consent model to cover their own back, sort of thing. Uh,
that makes
uh,
sense. Yeah,
yeah, Microsoft is now passing consent signals requiring attributes. I assume, yeah, okay. And the UAT extension, it just someone needs to the owner of it, be it Microsoft, need to do an update to kind of there's like a security setting they need to enable, which given the deadlines, I'm surprised they haven't kind of like fixed their
yeah,
own debugging tool. Uh, um, I'm kind of thinking because in the UK, Bing's not actually used that much. It's like maybe less than 10% of searches. I'm not sure if it's the same in Europe. Do you think this might have more? Because I know the enforcement here, we were just talking about Europe, though, aren't we?
yeah,
So
yeah.
it
This is
tends.
very specific from the European Union and the yeah the economic European area.
Mm. So it's going to be sites that, let's say, they're trying to like they're specializing in Bing or Microsoft and so high volume generic phrases and they're because I've seen some agencies actually focus just on Bing. So it's they're more like in fact kind of exposed because there are certain nuances in terms of how Bing works compared to kind of Google Ads
Yeah.
with like keyword matching and everything else. So it will be interesting to see kind of an after like a fallout sort of thing. Like did everyone think, oh, did they stop advertising on Bing? Did they fix the issue? Did Bing kind of bump the deadline down the road? Like, or does an enforcement thing happen? What do you think is going to be what's going to happen on after May the 4th?
If they take the same approach as Google did, then they will probably not instantly cut people off, even though I've just threatened that they will. They will likely start sending out emails to people who are sending data without these consent signals, and then they will get sort of like a deadline. Okay, have this fixed by now. I don't think it will just be shut off as such, because that's again that's what Google did. So they have the luxury of being able to check. Okay, what have the competitors or yeah the front runners done? So I'm if I would have to guess, I'd say like they'll start sending out emails starting next week saying like, hey, we got some data from you, but there's no consent signal. Get this done, otherwise you'll just assume it's a no. That would be my guess based
Yeah,
on prior experience.
so in essence, it's going to cause a conversion outage and a remarketing outage.
Also, as I can see in the chat, someone also wrote the documentation suggests that attribution will be less affected and some servers limited, and that goes into what I spoke about, that the remarketing capabilities will be affected, and the conversion data. So you will suddenly see like your data will start to look odd. Like you'll suddenly see far fewer conversions. You'll see that's usually what people notice first. Like hey, my conversions this took a nosedive. That's probably what they'll start seeing if they aren't warned up front.
So possibly as an action for attendees, then maybe they should turn on like a change detection or like a daily kind of CS3 report of like conversion percentage, etc. Or even in GA4, they could do anomaly detection and try and filter it for source, a medium of Bing CPC, and just see if obviously it would run a day behind, so they wouldn't get an alert until maybe like the Tuesday morning sort of thing.
Yeah,
But the both the threshold alert and anomaly detection alert wouldn't be a bad idea.
that would definitely indicate if things are not configured correctly. So that's actually it's a very good point.
But the when I've seen problems with conversion outage though, they sometimes cause a lag before like they pull the CPA down. So if it is less effective, not suddenly stopped, a bit like with kind of basic consent mode almost, then it would mean a gradual kind of bid deflation. Which at that point I do wonder whether Bing might kind of jump in and like times two on like the bids in the auction or something like just to kind of protect their own like because it's like they don't want advertisers suddenly you automatically pay less. So
Yeah.
and that's obviously tied to conversion. So I do wonder if Bing kind of add some manual fixes in there or whatever. But let's kind of see what happens. Um, the I saw if sites have got if they want to kind of run a scan to make sure that they've got Bing kind of inside consent and also with these kind of sort of categories set. Is it worth them doing? So I think because User-Centrics and Cookiebot have both got kind of free scanners,
Hmm.
so it might be worth Will, if you want to put a link to the free scanner in the chat, so people can run their own kind of quick kind of check, or search Google Cookiebot or
Yeah,
User-Centric Scanner.
basically if you just go to cookiebot.com and on the front page immediately you'll have the
Mm,
the compliance scan. So you can't go wrong there.
mm.
That's then it will definitely tell you if these services run without consent. Uh, so you can do that, or again just do a trial and then you'll the scan will start automatically. And if you hate it, don't do anything. Don't add any payment information. It will just expire.
Yeah, and it should at least flag the top 10 kind of like problems that it detects,
Yeah.
such as like being outside consent or whatnot. I'm just putting the
Yeah,
link to
if you
the.
want the detailed information, I would definitely just do a trial.
Hmm.
Um, of course, there's some steps involved in that, but then you'll get the actionable information. The compliance test is more to show you whether there's a problem, not how to fix it. So if you yeah, it's a good way to just quickly check. Okay, hey, am I somewhat all right? Or is there a problem? But if you also want to have some actionable information, then I would say do a trial. Uh, and don't add any payment information until you decide you want to use it, and then it will just expire after 14 days if you don't like it.
Cool. And just on that note, I'm just going to take the screen share control for a second. If you want to
Yeah.
get 20% off on Cookiebot, you use that link that we put into chat, and then it talks you through the process. You got to fill in a form, and then we create the account for you, and then we apply the 20% discount. And there's the page that basically explains those steps. The and because yeah, Richard, I'm a great fan of Cookiebot. I think it's one of the best kind of tools in terms of like ease of use of configuring a cookie banner, and compared to some other tools in the market which really confuse customers, it's easy for both agencies and brands to kind of use. So and we've used it for most of our clients, so including our own website. So the so I'm conscious of time a bit, so I'm just going to put the speaker survey into chat for people to fill that in for access to slides. And also on that speaker survey, they can tick an option to say if they want to be emailed that 20% off voucher code, or get a demo of User-Centrics or Cookiebot or our app as well. So if you want to kind of fill that in, by all means, kind of do so. I would say that it's not just the tool, though. From what I've seen, there's actually an understanding of how to use the tool properly. So
Yeah.
you kind of need a bit of both. And I've seen people pay a lot of money for tools and still kind of get into a bit of hot water. So yeah, I'd recommend, especially on the initial setup as well, kind of getting external expertise to avoid any potential very expensive sort of either GDPR fines or lawsuits in America or whatnot. Thank you so much for that, Richard. Some great material there, and people can also connect with you on LinkedIn as well. So I'll just quickly find you on LinkedIn and just put that in chat so people can. Do you think there'll be a consent mode V3, Richard?
Not on the short term, but inevitably there probably will be. Legislations change, expand, and maybe there will be something that also applies to the US and other legislation. So inevitably, yes, but not in the short term.
Yeah, I think yeah, it's everything that Trump is kind of doing, it's sort of caused so much disruption there. I think it seems everyone's kind of waiting for a bit of the water to sort of settle a bit. Okay.